and support of the museum is appreciated, and so we hope we can do the same for you. So welcome to the Royal BC Museum for tonight's talk entitled Maya, Rediscovering 3,000 Years of History. We're gathered here on the traditional territories of the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations, Lekwungen-speaking peoples, and we raise our hands to their people and chiefs, past, present, and future, and we thank them. So a quick word about our format for tonight. Our presentation is going to last approximately 45 minutes, but then there's going to be an opportunity to talk to Dr. Grube and ask questions. So we have an open mic, so we're going to be able to pass so everyone can hear the questions and then hear the answers. For anybody who needs to use a washroom, they are out both of these back doors and in the back hallway on this same level. So know that that's there. Your coats, some of you have left coats down. Make sure when we then move up to the galleries after the talk, you're taking your coat with you, and then you can leave at your leisure afterwards. The exhibition, I would expect probably an hour and a half you're going to take, so I'm thinking around 9:30 will be a time when security's starting to move people out. But again, we're looking at an all clear by 10 o'clock. The gift shop is also open. They brought volunteers in specifically for this evening. The gift shop has wonderful product, and it's all sourced from Guatemala, from cooperatives there. So if you can support the Guatemalan people as much as possible, that would be appreciated as well. What else do I need? Housekeeping. We are closed now down in this area, so if you need to leave the building, I'm going to be at the back. If you have to, let me know and I can get you back in, because the doors will lock at a particular period of time. So, our image of Maya culture has changed radically in recent decades. New research shows that the Maya are one of the oldest civilizations on the American continent. And during their heyday, they created a dense urban landscape in the tropical rainforest of Central America. After the collapse of their cities, the culture changed, but continued and withstood even the Spanish conquest. Today, Maya culture is still alive in Mexico, Guatemala, and Belize, and in British Columbia. Tonight, we will learn more about the development of the Maya from 1000 BCE until today, and how new research has changed our understanding of the Maya civilization. Dr. Nikolai Grube is the chair of anthropology of the Americas at the University of Bonn. In addition to his teaching activities, Nikolai conducts various research projects in Mexico, Guatemala, and Belize, and has collaborated with numerous excavation projects in the Maya region, particularly, and here I go with my pronunciations, and he's sitting at the back, Caracol, Belize, Copan, Honduras, Homo, and Yaxca, thank you, Yaxca in Guatemala. Since 2009, he's led a major German Science Foundation-funded excavation project in the Mayan city of Uxmal. And in 2013, the Academy of Sciences and Arts of North Rhine-Westphalia approved a long-term scientific project, text database, and a long-term scientific dictionary of classical Maya. It's dedicated to the documentation of all Maya hieroglyphic inscriptions and the creation of a corpus-based dictionary. He is one of the original code breakers of the hieroglyphs of Guatemala. Nikolai Grube is a scientific consultant for several exhibitions in Maya culture and other civilizations in pre-Hispanic America, but most recently, he's consulting as curator of Maya, the Great Jaguar Rises. I have my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Nikolai Grube.
Thank you very much, Jeanette, for this great introduction, and I'm very happy to be here with you and to share my passion for this ancient culture with you here, that in this moment that we're so close to this exhibition, and you will have this great opportunity as you are amongst the first people to enter the exhibition halls and to become overwhelmed by the beauty of these objects and the beauty of the display of these incredible archaeological pieces, which many of them have never been shown outside of Guatemala before, And some of these objects which are shown in this exhibition have not even been on display in Guatemala itself. So this is an incredible opportunity. And I would like to provide a little bit background for you by talking about the history of Maya civilization and what we know about the Maya. And of course, time is limited, so I can only pick out a few highlights. And I'm happy to answer to your questions after my presentation is over. So I usually start with a map that provides some background. You see that the Maya world is located in 5 contemporary countries. It's the south of Mexico. Let me see whether I can use a PowerPoint here.
No.
It was completely wrong.
It's a little red button at the top.
That's it. And the pointer, the Maya world is divided between Mexico, the Yucatan Peninsula, and the state of Chiapas. All of Guatemala is part of the Maya world. The small country of Belize, former British Honduras, part of Honduras, and northern part of El Salvador. So there are 5 modern countries which all host remains of the Maya civilization, and where there are still Maya living. There's about 6 million people still speaking Maya languages living in this region. And you see many dots on this map, and small stylized pyramids, and these are all archaeological sites. These are ruins, and we will see some images of the ruins. But before, I would like to introduce you to the landscape of the Maya. The Maya world is divided basically into 2 large regions. In the south, the highlands of Guatemala and the highlands of Mexico, volcanic highlands. You see some of the volcanoes reach heights more than 4,000 meters, which is I think 11,000 feet or 12,000 feet. 3 volcanoes in Guatemala are still active. This is still a region of many earthquakes, and an incredibly beautiful landscape, the highlands. But most of the archaeological site and the region where Maya civilization flourished was in the deep lowlands of Guatemala and Mexico. These are tropical lowlands with tropical temperatures, great humidity, and until very recently, all of the lowlands were covered by a dense tropical jungle vegetation, which you can still appreciate here on this image. This is vegetation which includes a large number of varieties. It's a biological hotspot, and a hotspot of diversity. And the Maya, of course, knew how to use this landscape and how to use this diversity. They are one of the very few urban civilizations that emerged in a tropical environment and were able to build cities within the jungle. Maya cities were discovered only recently. The history of Maya archaeology is very young, and we can say that it began approximately in the 1840s with the travels of John Lloyd Stephens and Frederick Catherwood, a pair of explorers. Stephens was American, Catherwood was British, and they had already traveled through the Near East and had published books with archaeological descriptions of important cities in Jordan and Egypt. And then they traveled to the Americas, and in particular to southern Mexico, the Yucatan Peninsula, and Guatemala, and they discovered many of the cities which today you can see as a tourist when you travel through this region, and the publications filled with incredible illustrations and colored illustrations, stimulated an outburst of interest in Europe and the Americas in Maya culture. And people all of a sudden discovered, well, there are cities in this abandoned jungle, and Catherwood and Stevens were followed by other explorers in the late 19th century, and the first archaeological project started in the early 20th century, and today there are always and any time of the year archaeologists working archaeological missions from different European countries, from the United States. Now, there's a Canadian archaeological project in Campeche in Mexico. It's a landscape full of archaeology. Many of you may know the most important and famous Maya cities. Tikal is a World Cultural Heritage Site. This is the largest Maya city in Guatemala, with its emblematic temples. There are 6 high temples with temple buildings standing on pyramids. But you don't, on these images, you don't see the great the complex architecture of the palaces and ball courts and many other structures and pieces of architecture which are here hidden by the jungle. Another Maya city, a very important Maya city, is Calakmul in Mexico. Tikal and Calakmul were the 2 dominant powers of the Classic period. The Classic period was a time between 200 and 900 AD, when all of these cities were packed with population, and each of these cities was reigned by a king, and there was never a unified Maya empire. But the Maya world was divided in between approximately 20 or 30 competing small kingdoms. But the 2 most important kingdoms were Tikal and Calakmul. But there are many other Maya cities. Too many, I cannot show you images of all of these Maya cities. Many of you may have seen them already. Toniná is a beautiful city in Chiapas in Mexico. Palenque, another World Cultural Heritage Site also in Mexico. You see the Palace of Palenque and the Temple of the Inscriptions were one of the most an incredible royal tomb has been discovered in the 1950s. And these cities flourished during what we call the Classic period of the Maya, between 200 and 900 AD. In this period of time, they built temples, high temples, all of constructed out of limestone. But long before the Classic period, the Maya had already settled in the lowlands, and the roots of these big cities reach back to a period which we call the pre-Classic period, the oldest Maya architecture. The beginnings of Maya architecture reach back to 900 BC. And about 500 BC are the first examples of Maya hieroglyphic writing. I will be talking about this a little bit later. And in about 900 AD, these Maya cities, hundreds of Maya cities, all of a sudden were abandoned. This is one of the great mysteries of archaeology. What has happened to these Maya cities? Why were they abandoned by the population? Archaeologists are still debating this issue. I think we have an explanation for it because there were 2 factors: a political collapse at approximately 800 AD, and which was followed by a period of droughts and climate change, which made living in these cities and doing agriculture impossible. So people migrated from the Maya lowlands and moved into the highlands of Guatemala and to the northern part of the Yucatan Peninsula, where the Maya continued to live in the post-Classic period. The culture had changed, but they still erected temples, which looked, of course, very different from those which they constructed before. Until the Spanish period, the Spanish conquest. When the Spaniards came in the 16th century, there were still Maya kingdoms in the Yucatan Peninsula and in the highlands of Guatemala. They were conquered by the Spaniards, but the Maya continued to live under Spanish dominion in the colonial period, and of course they continue to live until today. And I will be talking a little bit about contemporary Maya later on. So let us have a look at Maya cities. Maya cities, when we look at these maps, you can see we have usually a collection of large buildings in the center of cities, and many small constructions around these cities. The Maya cities were not densely populated, and they look very different from our cities. There were no roads, there were no city walls, and there is no clear city planning recognizable, which is typical for cities in the tropics. But in the center of the cities you see clusters of large buildings. Many of them were palaces or temples. Another image, this is the map of Tikal, and in Tikal you can also see that the important architectural groups are connected by large causeways, and the big temples which you saw at the beginning, the aerial view just shows these two temples in the center of the city. Tikal was an enormous city with a population probably as many as 75,000 people during its high time. What do we know about Maya cities? Until very recently, our knowledge of Maya cities was very limited, but because most of the remains, the archaeological remains, stayed hidden under dense vegetation. But as many of you may have read in the press releases from last year, particularly in Guatemala, archaeologists have employed a new technique, LiDAR, by which you can fly over the jungle, and the plane would transmit laser beams, laser pulses, and this would penetrate the forest and be reflected from the ground. And so these the LiDAR machine would collect a cloud of dots, and this could be used to reconstruct a 3D model of the surface. So LiDAR is a technique which allows us now to look through the forest, and you can take out, or you can calculate you can delete the forest electronically from this point cloud, and reconstruct a map or a model really of the soil and of all the constructions, of stone constructions. You can take away the forest. And this is what turns out when you apply this LiDAR technology. This is a LiDAR image of Tikal, of the center of Tikal. You see the architecture of Tikal as it looks in these 3D in a LiDAR model. Tikal is one of the cities which we already understood quite well. This is a LiDAR image from an archaeological project in Campeche, which is close to where I'm working, to my own archaeological project. These cities here, what you see here, this is monumental architecture. These are remains of Maya palaces, of Maya houses built out of stone. And we didn't know before, they were hidden in the jungle. So LiDAR technology now allows us to find cities, to rediscover cities which have long been lost. We can see them with this technology. And now we can send people, we can send archaeologists to actually see these buildings and excavate them. But you don't, here you see major buildings, but what is most interesting, most fascinating is we do not only see large palaces and stone buildings, but we see also very small houses. The remains of the constructions, the remains of the houses of Maya commoners. Because until very recently, very little was known about the life of the Maya commoners, of Maya farmers. And here, these small dots which you see here, all of these are the basis of the houses of Maya commoners.